Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into what is arguably one of the most transformative concepts in all of learning, educational scaffolding. I am so excited you're here for this. If you've ever watched a learner just completely struggle, and you felt that intense, overwhelming urge to jump right in and give them the answer, yeah, you're definitely not alone. But it begs the question, how do we build truly independent learners? How do we foster minds that can eventually solve these complex problems totally on their own? Well, today, we're unpacking the mechanics of exactly how to do that by leveraging some seriously powerful techniques.
Here's our quick roadmap for the explainer today. 1. The construction of understanding. 2. The psychology of scaffolding. 3. The gradual release model. 4. Actionable classroom strategies. And lastly, 5. What scaffolding is not.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the construction of understanding. We really need to start by looking at a fundamental challenge that every single educator, parent, or mentor faces when they're trying to pass on knowledge. And that is, how do we build independent minds without just doing the work for them? Honestly, this question right here is the absolute crux of the issue. We've all seen a student wrestling with a really complex math problem or a brutal writing assignment, and that frustration is just palpable. But if we step in and simply hand them the solution, we actually rob them of that productive struggle, the exact struggle that builds new neural pathways. We accidentally create this cycle of dependency where the next time they face a challenge, they just freeze up and wait to be rescued. On the flip side, if we do nothing, they might completely give up. So where's the middle ground?
Well, the answer lies in scaffolding. This means breaking learning into manageable chunks and providing temporary tools to help students master a new skill. Let's think about the core metaphor here. Picture an actual massive building under construction. It's wrapped in all these metal poles and wooden planks, right? Workers stand on those temporary platforms so they can reach the highest floors. But once that building stands firm on its own, all that scaffolding gets taken away. Not because it failed, but simply because it's no longer needed. The student's mind is that building under construction, and your support is that temporary scaffolding.
Or, here's another way to think about it that brilliantly illustrates the concept and makes me a little hungry. Think about baking a cake. Initially, to get that perfect, specific shape, you pour the liquid batter into a mold. That mold gives the batter the rigid structure it desperately needs while it's still, vulnerable and gooey. But once it goes through the heat of the oven and is fully baked, what do? You remove the mold. The cake can literally stand on its own now. And that is exactly what we're doing with learners. We provide the structure until they are fully baked.
Moving right along to Section 2, the psychology of scaffolding.
To really master scaffolding, we have to understand its psychological roots. Like, why is this specific method so undeniably effective for the human brain? This concept didn't just pop out of thin air. Back in the early 1900s, Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky argued that we actually learn best in social environments, that we construct meaning through interaction. He developed this idea called the zone of proximal development. Basically, it's the idea that a learner can do so much more with the guidance of someone knowledgeable than they ever could completely alone. Fast forward a bit to 1976, and psychologist Jerome Bruner builds on Vygotsky's work, officially coining the term scaffolding. And today, this elegant theory isn't just for little kids. It's applied across every sector, for all ages, to build independent skills.
Bruner captured the whole essence of why this works beautifully. He realized that when a learner is faced with a brand new, highly complex task, they're often completely paralyzed by the sheer number of choices and variables. Where do you even start? Scaffolding works because it actively reduces those overwhelming choices. It basically narrows their field of vision so they can focus all of their precious cognitive energy strictly on acquiring the new skill rather than stressing over where to even begin.
Okay, let's get into the actual how-to with Section 3, the gradual release model.
So now that we know why it works, let's bring it down from high-level psychology into real-world application. How do we pull this off? Well, we use a brilliantly simple framework known as the gradual release of responsibility model. Imagine these as 4 nested circles. Step 1 is I do. The teacher models the behavior while the student just watches and absorbs. Step 2 is we do. The teacher and the class tackle it together. Step 3 is you do together. Students work in pairs or groups, leaning on each other. And finally, Step 4 is you do alone. Total, pure independence. Notice how with every single step, the teacher's role literally shrinks, while the student's responsibility grows.
Let's ground this with a concrete example. Say you're teaching a student how to write a structured paragraph. In the first phase, the modeling phase, you might project a beautifully written paragraph up on the board. You could color code the topic sentence in yellow and the supporting details in green. You're showing them the exact target, then, in the outline phase, you give them a template with sentence starters. Things like, first, blank. For example, blank. Remember the cake mold? This is the mold. Finally, in the independent phase, they just get a blank piece of paper and a prompt. Your hints become incredibly minimal. Maybe just a quick question like, okay, what do you want the reader to know first?
When we look at the level of teacher support over time, pacing is absolutely everything. At the start, your support is incredibly high. You're practically holding their hand. In the middle, that support drops to medium. You're standing beside them, pointing the way forward. By the end, support is low. The student is walking entirely on their own, and you're just watching proudly from afar. This deliberate, intentional fading of help, that's the secret sauce. Because if you don't fade the support, it's not scaffolding anymore. You're just doing the work for them.
Which brings us to Section 4, Actionable Classroom Strategies.
Let's step down the abstraction ladder even further and look at the specific tools you can take and use tomorrow morning. Scaffolding generally falls under three main umbrellas. First up, we have sensory scaffolding. This uses prototypes or visual elements so learners can literally use their senses to grasp an abstract concept. Second is graphic scaffolding, which relies on charts, tables, and infographics to clearly communicate workflows. And third is interactive scaffolding, which happens naturally through socialization and group activities.
Within those three categories, here are the top rapid-fire classroom strategies you absolutely should be using. First, break content into bite-sized chunks to ensure progressive understanding. Don't overwhelm them all at once. Second, always demonstrate. For example, don't just talk about magnetism, bring an actual magnet to class and show it picking up iron nails but ignoring paper. Third, slow down. Pause frequently to give students processing time instead of just racing through the material. Fourth, always deliver the prerequisites in the vocabulary before you introduce the big, complex topic. And finally, enable a buddy system. This is a brilliant example of interactive scaffolding, pairing a stronger student with one who's struggling so they can coach one another using their own words.
And for the highly tactical folks watching, here is an incredibly practical toolkit of physical scaffolds. You could use laminated cards for sentence starters. You could plaster flowcharts on the walls as visual aids. You can provide simple checklists for self-review. But I have to say, my absolute favorite is the hint envelope. Just imagine placing a sealed envelope on a student's desk that contains one single clue. They're only allowed to open it if they are truly deeply stuck. It gives them just enough of a bump to get over the hurdle without giving away the whole shebang.
Finally, let's wrap things up with Section 5, what scaffolding is not.
To finish our framework, we really need to use a bit of contrast to clear up some super common misconceptions. We have to draw a really sharp line in the sand here. True scaffolding is fundamentally different from just rescuing a struggling student. The wrong idea is giving the answer. The right idea is giving a clue so they can discover the answer themselves. The wrong idea is doing most of the work. The right idea is doing progressively less work over time. And critically, the wrong idea is treating support as some one-size-fits-all Band-Aid. The right idea is constantly adjusting your support to fit each individual student's developmental state. Think of it like a balance scale. On one side, if you give too much help, the scale completely tips over into dependence. The student basically learns helplessness. On the other side, if you give too little help, the scale tips into deep frustration and the student just shuts down entirely. Scaffolding is the absolute art of finding that exact sweet spot right in the middle, what Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development. It's perfectly balanced. To anchor everything we've talked about today, I want you to keep this vivid metaphor in your mind. Scaffolding is exactly like putting training wheels on a bicycle. Those training wheels provide that essential early structure so the child doesn't fall over and scrape their knees while they're trying to figure out the complex mechanics of pedaling and steering at the same time. But you don't leave them on forever. You take them off when the rider is ready. And hey, if they wobble a bit when you take them off, you don't immediately bolt the training wheels back on. You just run alongside them, maybe a hand hovering near the seat for a few seconds until they catch their balance.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Equipping your learners with scaffolds is deeply important, but having the courage and the strategy to systematically remove those scaffolds, that is where the magic truly happens. It's really the only way they become independent thinkers. So I leave you with this. Are you ready to let go of the bike, step back, and watch your learners ride away entirely on their own? Thank you so much for exploring the incredible power of educational scaffolding with me today. Take these tools, adjust your support, and go build some independent minds.